January 6th now, the feds charged the leader and several members of the right-wing group, the Oath Keepers, with seditious conspiracy. Here's the leader, Stuart Rhodes. He's a former Army paratrooper with a law degree from Yale. The FBI arrested him today.
We're going to get into the brains of the Republicans because we need to understand them. Our dear friend, Scottie Nell Hughes, is joining us today. Scottie is a news anchor, political commentator. She was a commentator at CNN during the 2016 election, was an official surrogate. Were you actually on staff, Scottie, for Trump? I can't remember.
Non-paid. I was the first surrogate that was not, but I refused to be paid by the campaign.
That's so funny. I was the first surrogate for Bernie. What a weird coincidence.
That's why
we used to go head to head.
We always, Nomiki, we're going on almost a decade this year of friendship, which shows that if people on opposite of the aisles can have as much fun, as much good conversations that we have, why can't the rest of the world?
Well, I think that the good thing about you is you have your own personal values and you could separate that from the insanity that gets swept up.
I might not agree with you, but I'm not going to demonize you, Nomiki, because at least you care for it. That's what across the board is why we do get along so well, is we want people to be paying attention because we know that democracy really does die in darkness. And people are too busy and they want us to ignore what they're doing in Washington, D.C. on both sides of the aisle.
A little over a year ago today, there was a rally outside of the Capitol. They were trying to stop this election from happening. And now today, the head of the Oath Keepers is going to be prosecuted for sedition, a real issue. And Kevin McCarthy, of course, has illustrated that he, in conversations with Donald Trump says he feels partially responsible.
I say he has responsibility. He told me personally that he does have some responsibility. I think a lot of people do. What I proposed, which I think history will say I'm right, because it's the right thing to do, I believe, have a bipartisan commission and get all your facts. Actually work through the grand jury to find out at the end instead of predetermining whether someone's guilty or not.
I want to get your reaction to this really quick. Let's play this clip, the one of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy on why he is not cooperating with the January 6th committee. Let's play this clip.
If you're subpoenaed, will you defy a subpoena? Will you defy a subpoena?
You have a unique window into the president on that day, January 6th. You were one of the only few people who spoke to him that day. Doesn't the American public have a right to know what the President of the United States was thinking and doing while the U.S. Capitol was under attack?
You know, that's a great question. You know the great thing about that? I didn't wait a year later. On January 6th, I spoke to the American public. Not by one network, but by many networks. My conversation was very short, advising the President of what was happening here. There is nothing that I can provide the January 6th committee for legislation of them moving forward. There is nothing in that realm. It is pure politics of what they're...
So, Scottie, I mean, where do you stand on all this? This has gotten out of control. You have Oath Keepers, you have Proud Boys running for office locally now, many of whom, by the way, whether Boogaloo Boys or Proud Boys, were arrested at the Capitol, are now trying to run for office. This is, can we at least both say that what happened on January 6th was bad and was, treason?
Well, I don't know about treason, but I will say 100% that I condemn it, as most conservatives, most Republicans have. Absolutely. What happened on January 6th did more damage, not only to our democracy, but also the Republican Party. But Nomiki, here's where I think there's some discrepancy and why we're having a hard time getting full answers as to what's happened on January 6th and the events leading up to it, and holding the proper people accountable, which I still do not feel like we have held or gone after the right people yet who were involved that caused that day to happen. Leading up to it, Nomiki, there was no way in hell I was going to be anywhere near DC. Most conservatives going into it that had a long history knew something was not right about that day. There were too many red flags. there were so many red flags, not only from the different people that were organizing it, but just you could just tell the sort of emotions, the rhetoric that was being spoken. It was not one of peace. It was not one of it was anger, and there was a lot of insightful language that just did not seem like the traditional the same anger. You know, people were angry back when Obamacare went through, and you saw Glenn Beck have million people here marching in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
We knew what that was like. You saw parts of that. And I do believe those first 48 hours, because there were 3 days of kind of rallies going here. And those were peaceful. They were full of prayer. There was lots of, those were fine. But it was that final straw. There was something about that final day, that final rally, that whole part that we still do not have full transparency on both sides. And I think if the January 6th committee was truly interested in not making this into be a political weapon to take out their targets, the GOP and Trump from running again in 2024, if they really wanted to get to the truth of what happened that day, you would not see such a partisan committee with such the questions targeted that people aren't even really being the ones that are being publicly allowed to answer. You're not getting it. We're not finding out the
Scottie
truth from both
is
sides.
partisan.
What happened that
This
day.
was a political event. This is not, I love, like, this was a purely political event that day in which they were trying to take down the president-elect from his election results being valid. That was political. I mean, the rallies minutes before Josh Hawley and President Trump himself, minutes before they stormed the Capitol, they were rallying and supporting.
They were telling them, but they weren't telling them
they
to
were
go and
saying
break doors and break windows. They weren't telling them that.
Well, that's what we need to know. Was it or was it not? Was it happening through who was in this chain of command? And this is what we need to understand.
We need to know. I agree. We do need to know that. What intelligence agencies were involved in it? We had just seen weeks before over in with Governor Whitmer that there was intelligence agencies involved in that kidnapping more than the people that were arrested. They were bad people, but it was amazing how right before the election that you had all of a sudden all these FBI agents that were infiltrating this group more than the actual group itself. So we need to know exactly where was intelligence on there. Why do we not know who actually left the bombs outside the RNC and the DNC? Who is that individual? Why do we only have 2 shots of them? There's so many questions that if we want to get to the truth of it, then let's get to the truth.
But they are.
Let's not make this to be a partisan. But they're not.
Said, the
this
FBI,
is all about
that's
making
not
sure
true.
that
that's not true.
2024.
They're investigating. They're absolutely investigating. But
Why
it is about
do they not have
2022.
an answer?
Kevin McCarthy. I mean, how long it took the Republicans to denounce what happened because they're so afraid of
It
losing
took them minutes.
the kooky Trump base. Kevin McCarthy to this day is barely even
January 6th. He said it just then that he was within minutes outside saying this is wrong. Every Republican got on there and denounced the violence, much more than what we saw when the riots were happening around the country, much more than the riots in Portland that burned down cities and people were murdered at. And
there was no. There were no riots in Portland. People were living in their communities, trying to defend their communities.
Oh, that was a community. There was no race.
That's not a riot.
There's no violence.
Okay.
You see no politicians.
Rittenhouse was the only murderer. Let's just be very clear. The only murders that occurred. Let's be really clear here.
We're all scared of Rittenhouse.
Oh, how many murders has Antifa, an unofficial organization, Antifa? That's not true. Kyle Rittenhouse went there in a peaceful protest over a murder of a black man by police who they've now been prosecuted. And Kyle Rittenhouse went there as a vigilante who had traveled across borders to be a vigilante, who trained as a vigilante as a kid, brainwashed child vigilante. So, I mean, the reality here is there were murders at the Capitol, and the people who murdered, and the one
that got murdered was one of the people who went in there. We never found it, and the person who murdered her was just let off. He was let off. The actual murderer. No, the Ashley Babbitt. Ever heard of her? She's the only one that was murdered there. The rest of them were not murdered at the Capitol. Let's be a little factual correct here, Nomiki. Like I said,
how so? I don't understand. A police officer.
Nobody was murdered there. He was not murdered there. The only murder of a police officer that's happened at the Capitol was a few weeks later by an Islamic terrorist.
No, there was
extremists.
Oh my goodness! So you're saying that the people who died at the Capitol weren't murdered?
They weren't. There was only one death at the Capitol that day, Nomiki. The rest were heart attacks or suicides later on. But that day, there was only one body bag that was carried out. It was Ashley Babbitt. And her murderer was let go and let free.
But it's
But
about
no
intent.
questions there.
So my
Oh,
question is,
okay. So she
there was
allowed
intent.
to be
Plenty of
murdered.
people.
Because she was there. She was allowed to be murdered, Nomiki?
There's no allowed to be murdered. Scottie, the intent
That was
of these.
the intent.
In writing, they literally, the intent going in, whether it was on blogs, in text messages, in Facebook posts, the intent was to lynch the vice president.
Oh,
that
okay.
is an intent of murder. And those folks who are coming in, who you denounce yourself from being anywhere connected to them, as you should, those folks going in were angry, were brainwashed. Many of whom the FBI has interviewed now on camera say and admit, maybe as a legal defense or not, that they were brainwashed because they were on QAnon blogs. But we have to be real here. Much of the Republican Party is so afraid of losing this base of insane people, insanely brainwashed folks who have white supremacy in their veins, that they're unwilling to go after them hardcore. And they're saying, oh, this is all about politics. Of course it's about politics. The rise of fascism. What are you going to do? Not make it about politics? Everything's politics, Scottie. You don't think that in 2022, Senator Hawley doesn't want to keep his position? You don't think that the RNC is worried that this is going to make them look bad and they're not going to be able to win a year in which they should be winning? Of course Republicans are going to make it about politics.
No, Mickey, I don't think the RNC is worried about winning this year because obviously the current state, the things that Americans are having to deal with based off of this agenda of this presidency, that's why the Republicans are going to win. January 6th has nothing to do with why our grocery stores are empty and why our inflation's through the roof and why our men and women are preparing for war right now because this president wants to get us involved somewhere to make up for the money that he lost in Afghanistan. Come on, Nomiki. There's bigger issues that we have.
What war are we getting ready for, Scottie?
Have you missed what's happening in Ukraine?
Have you missed? No one said we're sending troops into Ukraine. That's not even in conversation. Of course I'm following it.
Not. Go look at go talk about not even the blogs. Go look at the headlines right now. Europe at the closest state of war. NATO preparing for war. Guess
that's not the U.S.
NATO.
U.S.
NATO's not the U.S. Nomiki.
We're
kind of a big part of it. We're 45% of it.
We are members of NATO. Oh, really? So when NATO invaded Libya, there were no U.S. troops. That was French troops mainly. Let's be very clear. That's not how NATO operates. And I love how my favorite thing is when the right wing blankets everything like it's all the same.
But my favorite thing is that you have been a target of demonization, and the people that you represent have been demonized and falsely accused of all sorts of things. So for you to so quickly tarnish and try to paint all conservatives, all Trump supporters, I'm
not.
I'm a little
surprised.
Said
that you were different.
No, you did. Well, I know I am, but I'm talking about everybody that was there that day. A very small percentage of the
everybody who was there that day that stormed the Capitol, the thousands of people who stormed the Capitol. I'm not talking about the people who showed up at the rally. I am talking about
there was over a million. A very small percentage actually stormed the Capitol. They should be held accountable for the proper crimes that they've done, as well as the Capitol Police who opened the doors and let them in, as well as the ones that talked to them as they were being guided by the velvet ropes through statutory hall.
What about Lauren Boebert?
Hold all those people accountable.
What about the congressional members?
Hold them all accountable.
Including the congressional members who cheered them on and were communicating with them. Oh, they were communicating. There were text messages now released that there was communications between members of Congress.
Telling them to break the windows, telling them to break the law. I missed those communications.
He said, come on in. Come on in. That's illegal.
People's house. Well, what do you mean, come on in? Yeah, they opened the doors. Guess what? The police officers opened the door for them. Come on in.
You've been to the Capitol before, Scottie. You can't just open the door. A police officer, you have to go to security. Sometimes you have to get your background checked.
But the police officers did, though. Why, Nomiki? Why? Did you not see those pictures?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very curious. Why
we need to find the answers on that. Why are they
in some of those cases, they did not open the doors, though. We did see the pictures. We watched it that day.
And we
saw Fox.
Should be held accountable. They should be held accountable.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Completely agree.
So hold them accountable, but let's not demonize
and Trump,
the entire
Trump
movement.
Himself has said to Kevin McCarthy that he feels partially responsible. Do you think that Donald Trump should be held responsible for his actions, his rhetoric, inciting violence? I think that there's an argument to be made that he did incite much of this. Not just
Listen, there was more violence underneath Barack Obama.
That's not true. What are you talking about? In a court of law, this would be thrown out. This argument's not relevant. Irrelevant. I don't know what you're saying. What about Donald Trump? Barack Obama never incited someone to storm the Capitol and denounce the fact that an election was won.
The American people, the rest of the land doesn't matter. See, if you're going to hold Trump accountable for the violence that supposedly he inspired on January 6th, There were 14 race riots that happened underneath President
What?
Obama. Should he be held
That's not
responsible for all the
what
violence
is
and all
what,
of the destruction
what are
done?
you
It because
saying?
that was
We were talking
underneath
about
him.
storming the Capitol and overthrowing the Capitol. You're talking
But
about
at the same time,
quote
Obama
unquote
commented on
riot.
racial
What is a
issues
riot?
going on in the United States. If you're going to
Was the
hold one
Women's March a
accountable-
riot?
because they commented, yes, absolutely, because there was actually the inauguration. All of
The
that
Women's March was a riot, you're saying?
after Trump's inauguration. Absolutely. Oh, you're talking about
I
the
was
one that happened
there.
a
I
week
didn't
later.
see any riots.
It was just yes, because they allowed that was all the same group of people together. But those of us that were not a part of that movement, we weren't allowed to be there. No, the pro-life women could. No, I was there. The pro-life women, they couldn't be a part of that rally.
Yeah,
They
because
excluded
being
them from that.
pro-life is a tool of the Koch brothers. That's why. Let's just be very real.
No, I'm pro-life. I'm going to be at the March for Life this weekend or next week with my family and thousands of others. Very proud to represent the future daughters of this world that would like to be born.
Okay.
That does not make me a part of Koch brothers. In fact, I'm probably the least
Who funds it
fan
then?
of the Koch
Who
brothers.
funds it? Follow the money.
The pro-life movement.
What murders
had
and
nothing to do with
riots
funding.
happened at the Women's March? Because going back to this, we were talking about the insurrection of the Capitol in which they literally tried to lynch the Vice President of the United States.
Hey, you know what?
And
I'm
you're making that equal to the Women's March?
You can, yeah, I can.
How is this equal to the Women's March? Women in 65-year-old women in pussy hats are
yes,
doing the same.
All very okay. Okay, you're right.
Who murdered? Was there violence at the Women's March? I didn't know about that. Largest march in the history of the planet. That was violent? I didn't see anything. No headlines.
It was all
Scottie,
peace and love and
come on, move to New York. I know who you really are. I know who you really are. Get out of Tennessee.
I'm definitely not a New Yorker. I'm definitely not a New Yorker.
I've hung out with you in New York. I know who you are. I think that would be a great career. Former Trumper becomes a progressive. How Kellyanne Conway.
I'm definitely not a progressive. But what I am for, the one thing we can agree on, Nomiki, and I think this is where we should probably end this conversation, is that one thing the progressives mostly, and I think conservatives could agree on, is that we don't need to get ourselves involved in foreign problems that don't have anything to do with us, that don't actually have anything to do with American security. That we don't need to get ourselves involved in foreign problems. And that is one thing we can agree on. I think that's something that we should focus on our relationship, because everything else,
in general, not being not an interventionist is a great strategy, unless
American security is threatened. But according to you, we have enough of those threats here, so that should keep people occupied.
We do. We have a lot of those threats. Our Capitol was stormed a year ago, and now it's just politics. That's all. Yeah. Keep focusing on the fact that our government was almost removed. I will do that.
Okay. Yeah, they were definitely. We were definitely in danger. Go ask Kazakhstan. Ask them what an insurrection looks like, Nomiki. Then you'll maybe get back to me and tell me what a real overthrow of a government looks like.
I think there's many forms of overthrowing a government. Take care. Be well. Thanks for joining. I appreciate. Always a good fight. She's out. She's out. Well, that was fun. If you don't know this already, we are not millionaires and billionaires. We do not have major corporations funding us. And shocker, we're not going to appeal to the right wing and be anti-vaxxers so we get clickbait. No, that's not how we run our show. We run our show off of your support, specifically patrons. Patreon.com has been a lifesaver for us. Our patrons on Patreon really have kept this show going after the election wave, when everyone was riding it through the doldrums of last year. It makes a huge difference. And if you're not already part of our Patreon community, please join us at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We have all different levels available. We send you some swag if you join at a little higher of a level. And if you're not able to, or if you used to be a patron and you're going, it's a little tough right now, no worries. Message us. Send us a note at thenomikishow@gmail.com, or message us in Patreon and we will work something out. If you can give more and sponsor somebody else, that also makes a huge difference. But this is how we keep this community alive. We want to make sure that we have the best quality show for you. And this is how we do it. So thank you to all of our patrons who've been supporting us along the way. And if you're able to join us and join our family, we're going to have some fun stuff this year that we're sharing with our patrons.